Pro. And really what we're saying is, how do parts get into the system? How do they flow through the software program? And how do our financials keep track of parts in our system? Because as we know, most shops, for most general repair shops, parts typically account for half of our sales. And it's a pretty big investment when you're stocking parts or you're ordering special order parts. You order parts all day long. I know we did. So we want to be able to keep track of that investment, know where our money went. And we have some really nice features in MaxTrax that helps us keep track of parts that we order for specific jobs and helps us to remind, to remember to put those parts on the RO. I know I can count too many times, actually, of times that, you leave something off the bill. Of course, I have no shame. I would definitely call the customer and send them a bill a week later if we didn't charge them for a part that we used. But we really wanted to be able to streamline this process to, number one, make sure you track your investment. Number two, make sure all those parts get put on the parts ticket. And number three, really streamline your data entry. So there are three ways that parts are entered into MaxTrax. Either we have new system inventory. So it's the first time you're using the system, and we need to get those parts on the part list. Now, a lot of folks on the call are MotorTrax users who actually had converted data, so your inventory was already loaded in the system. But as you know, you order parts all the time and sell parts on ROs or over the counter all the time that you've never purchased before. So new system inventory or online parts ordering, if you order from WorldPac, Napa, CarQuest, all the different online parts ordering that we have, and by entering in a restock parts ticket. So let's say we were a new shop, or let's say we have some parts in our parts room that have never been put in stock before, never been entered into the system. So how would we do that? By clicking on the parts list, we now, parts search icon, forgive me, we bring up our parts list, and we click on the Add Parts button. Now, probably a good practice to get into to make sure we're not entering in a duplicate part number, which the system will let you do, is I usually just start typing the part number that I want to put in, let's say 5W30. And see, it's telling me right here, part number isn't found. So we can use the backspace key or the clear search to try the search again, but we know that 5W30 engine oil isn't in our system. So we're going to go ahead and click the Add Part button here in the lower left, which starts the Add a Part wizard. So here you can see in the wizard, these little red asterisks are telling us anything that is required to be entered into the wizard for the part record. Here we're just going to say 5W30 for our part number, but we're going to put 5W30 engine oil. Now, some people ask if you select is a fluid for oil or coolant, what does this do? This actually will track your anything that's selected as a fluid as an inventory part, but in a different section on the general ledger and a different section in some of your reports. So that's what that feature is used for. And of course, the German sort allows you to search using the German sort numbers on German part numbers. I think it's 3 digits, space, 3 digits, and then 4 digits, something along those lines, but it lets you look individually. And of course, we do have the barcode capability. So let's just click Next in the wizard. Location, obviously, self-explanatory, where it is in the parts room. Condition is new, used, or rebuilt. If you select rebuilt in the old program, it automatically would turn on the core tracking. It doesn't do that in MaxTrax Pro. And the reason why is you can have now a new part that does also have a core charge for the part suppliers out there that are trying to build up their core inventory to be able to start remanufacturing parts. Product code, most shops, I'd say 90% of shops just default to GI, which is general inventory, but you can always add additional product codes like I did for tires to track tires in the system under its own inventory asset account, track sales, the income account individually, as well as your cost of goods. If you just want to see what parts of your business are giving you the different type of income and revenue. And then we also have the size. This is where I typically put in tire sizes, and I also put in any kind of metric nuts and bolts, that kind of thing. If I want to put a size in there, I use it in here. So stocking inventory or stocking information, very different from motor tracks. You really don't have to decide if a part is stock or non-stock when you are putting in this part wizard. When you're entering through the parts wizard, you can decide later on if I want to stock the part, and you simply turn it on or off by entering in a best quantity. So let's say my best quantity is, since I get oil in 55-gallon drums, let's say 220, but then my minimum quantity is once I get down to 60 quarts, I want to go ahead and reorder my oil. I'll click Next. And here's our pricing information. My base cost for oil, I'll just put $2.25. I don't know what it is. Let's say my list price is $2.95. This is what I sell it for. I could also decide to use or not use my parts price matrix. And actually next week we're going to be having a webinar that goes through the details of part price matrix. So I'm not going to go into too much depth on this today. So let's go ahead and uncheck this, and I can manually tell the system I'm going to charge $2.95 per quart of oil. If I click the Advanced button at this point, this will open up a different part of the system where I can enter in that new system inventory amount. So let's say I just started my shop and I just got a 55-gallon drum of oil. So I'm going to go ahead and put in 220, and I can assign a primary vendor where I order my oil from. I can, let's say just for fun, we're just going to say Napa. And if they have a different part number, see, I just use 5W30, but if they have a different part number, we can enter that here. So if we create a purchase order and fax it to them, it'll have their part number on it. If I knew what my cost was going to be from that vendor at all times, I could also enter that amount in here or leave it blank. I can also enter in a cross-reference number. We'll get into this a little bit more later, but there's a cross-reference and a cross-application feature in MaxTrax, and they are very different. I'll explore that a little bit later, but you could enter one cross-reference in the Add a Part wizard, and then once you create that part record, you can create additional cross-references. And if we were not selecting a cross-application by clicking the Select button, which would bring up our parts list, if we were just putting in cross-reference, we could give it a different description as well. Hazardous materials, I, for example, would charge 20 cents per quart of oil that I sell, and this will automatically be put on your repair order every time you use this part number. If I put down the part number 5 quarts at 5W30, it's going to charge $1 in hazardous materials fees. And likewise, you could put an additional tire disposal charge on your tires. Allowing auto update, this feature here allows us to auto update our pricing. We also can select whether or not we would want to make this a commissionable part if we're paying our techs or our service writers commission based on part sales. And we also have the ability to reset our base cost, which means that if the part cost changes, it will allow us to calculate our selling price based on the new parts cost. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Next, and it skips my my core tracking capability. I was in a different part of the wizard. But if it had cores, which of course oil doesn't, we would just click the box that says Track Cores and then select how much we pay for a core charge and how much we may sell or charge our customers if we charge them for a core charge. So any questions so far on that Add a Part wizard?
No.
Okay, go ahead. Did we have a question?
No, I just said no questions.
Okay. One other element as far as new system inventory I want to cover is that if you add a part to inventory through that Add a Part wizard, and I manually entered in 220 quarts, I think at a cost of what I put, $2.50 for that oil or $2.15, how this is affected on our financials is if I were to look under accounting, chart of accounts, and print my trial balance or view my trial balance, it actually is tracked right here where it says inventory adjustments. You can see I have a lot of new system inventory I just put in this new fresh system for the webinar this week, and that amount is tracked here, new system inventory. Now once you get all of your parts inventory in the system, you'll want to adjust this and move this inventory adjustment off to one of your capital investment or initial setup accounts. But for right now, this is where new system inventory goes, and typically it's a cost. It's actually a debit account, so we're debiting a debit account, making that account go up if we were actually making an adjustment in here for a damaged or lost part. Okay, so now the other way that we get parts into the system is through our online parts ordering. So let's go ahead and order a part online. So let's say for this Ford, we're going to add a part from Next Part. Let's go ahead and get that fuel filter coming from factory. So here I would select filters. My subgroup is filters. I'm going to select a fuel filter and display parts. Let's see if we have a fuel filter for this. And here we do. So I would just select the part that I wanted to add to my RO, click on Add Order, and now my order review is I'm buying a $10.40 part here in the lower right corner. I click on Order Review. You can see this Add Selected Items to RO is grayed out, but if I click Order Review, this will make this an active button. I will select this, and here's my part. Now, the way that I have my system set up is that if I order an online part, I automatically add it to inventory. So I did not have this part in inventory now, so let's go ahead and save this repair order. And it's telling me, it's prompting me, order this part, Sabrina, but we'll skip this for a moment. But now when I go into my part search, let's see, what was that? A GF, let's see, 6, there it is. So what it did, it created its own part record automatically. So instead of going through the Add a Part wizard, the online parts ordering will go ahead and create a record, and it will auto-populate information it does know. The part number, description. Now, of course, we have negative in stock because we need to order that part. We just ordered it, requested it from online. And it will put in pricing. It will put in the base cost that I paid, and it puts in the list price. And I can choose here to use my default price matrix. And if I unclick this and select it again, oh, that actually is my price matrix. It just happened to be the exact same amount as the list price. So that's another way that we get part numbers into the system. And for shops that don't use online parts ordering, you're familiar with this, we have restock parts. And this is where you enter in every vendor invoice that you receive for every part that you purchase from your business, for your business. We always want to get those into the system. So by clicking on the Restock Parts button here, icon on the toolbar, we start the Restock Parts wizard, and here we're going to input a received vendor invoice. I'm going to select my vendor, and here I'm going to enter the amount of the paper invoice that I'm going to duplicate in MaxTrax. Well, I don't actually know this right now, so I'm going to skip this for the moment. But here, let's say I'm restocking a vendor invoice from factory, which of course if I had a real one in front of me, I would know what that total amount was. But let's say, for example, I'm going to click Add Line Item. And I'm going to say I'm going to add my parts from Parts List. Now, I could just start typing the part number that I want to put in. Let's say a couple oil filters. Let's do PF2227E. And it's not there, so again, I start the Add a Part wizard. And I only am required to enter in the items with the red asterisks. I click Next. It's new, general inventory, good. Let's say my best quantity is 6 and minimum quantity is 2 because I'm going to stock these filters. List price on that, let's say that's my base cost, and I'm using the matrix to default. Or, of course, I think this is too much for a filter. I can always override it. Let's say I want to sell the filter for this amount. And I can always unclick my use price matrix and just say, I'm manually always going to charge this much for this filter, a 45% markup. Now, if I want the price to increase, if my price increases, I would want my little red arrow not to be pointing to my manual sales price. I could end up paying $12 for this filter and end up only selling it for $12.95. But let's say I want to always go for a 45% profit margin. And so what I would want to do is make sure that my little red arrow is pointing towards profit margin. So if in case it does change to $8, it's going to mark it up appropriately. and change my selling price. Again, I'm going to click Next. And here is that track cores for this part. If it had cores, I just check this box, which activates my core costs. And if I need to put in a new system inventory of any used cores in stock, this is where I do it. But of course, it's just a filter. So let's say what I've done so far is I've just created the part record. Now I can click Select to add it to this restocked vendor invoice, or just double click on it. And my quantity is 6. It prompts me to enter in my cost again, because my cost that I just created in the parts record may be different from what I'm actually paying on this invoice. If I know I'm paying a little high or a little low for this part on this one particular vendor invoice. Here I'm going to assign them to stock, but we always have the ability to reserve these parts for a repair order. And again, that's one of the features I told you about, where we really want to keep track of parts that we are ordering for a specific job to make sure that it gets on that ticket. We would actually reserve it for that ticket or for that repair order, or the parts invoice if we're selling a part over the counter. Let's add one more. Let's say I'm also going to get some Motorcraft filters. Let's say FL1A. We'll put these in there. Again, oil filter. I'm going new. Let's go ahead and stock these as well. 2 of each. My cost on these would be $338, and I'll just let my matrix fall on this one. And that's how quickly we add it. We click Select, and again, put in our quantity and our cost, $338, and it's stock. So now when I hit OK, Save, and post and update my inventory, it's going to prompt me. Well, this is my little warning. The amount in my vendor invoice does not match the starting target amount that I entered. That target amount here on the right and the green is on there so that you make sure you're checking your math. You're not doing any data entry errors. But, of course, I didn't know how much this was going to be. That's why I didn't put that on. So I'm going to go ahead and post vendor invoice anyway and enter in my vendor invoice number. So any questions on the restock parts and how we create a new parts record? Okay, so our third, let's see, we covered new system inventory, parts wizard, online parts ordering, restocked parts invoice. Our third way of doing this is actually by going into a ticket and creating a part on here using the buyout quick part. And we can at this point select to add a buyout quick part to the inventory list if we use this feature, just a different way. Okay, so let's go back into a parts record, and we'll see once we've actually created the parts record how we can go in and add cross-references or edit any amounts in there or adjust stock. So let's go back into parts search. Let's say we go into, let's go into that FL1A. So here, the parts record looks a little bit different than the parts wizard. The manufacturer, we can put in manufacturer information to be able to search for that part by name, line, or class. Miscellaneous, here is that condition. Remember, new, used, or rebuilt. Location, if you want to put in, I don't know, if you want to put maybe shelf 12, that's where they're stocked in our parts room. Popularity code, again, customizable by you. Weight is useful if you sell a lot of parts over the counter or end up shipping them. Again, the sizes where we talked about if we use tires or metric nuts and bolts, that kind of thing. And again, we can also select if it's a fluid buyout part or a German part. So let's say I want to know, where did I buy this part from? If I click on stock, I can view my purchases. Let me go ahead and save it. So I'm going to go back in here and view my purchases. We see here that I purchased it on March 3rd from factory on this invoice number, and this is how much I paid for it. So this is very useful for any warranty claims that you need to make, any warranty jobs. And if I were to sell this, I would have, of course I haven't sold it yet, but if I were to, I'd have my sales information in here as well. And I also can look at sales summary for the entire year. And of course I haven't sold this yet, I just entered it into inventory. But this would tell me what months I sell these parts more than others. Maybe air conditioning parts, of course, I sell more often in the summer. So let's go ahead and best quantity and minimum quantity. This is where I can change when to, let's say when I get down to 3. When I get down to 3, I want to reorder. And I want to reorder, I want to keep 8 of these in hand. So this is where we can adjust our stocking. Or again, we can make them 0. And then they will no longer show up on our reorder reports. It's actually not technically a stocked part anymore. It's that simple. So let's say, put that back. Let's say that we accidentally dropped one of those filters and we got a big dent in it, and of course you're not going to put an oil filter on with a dent in case that would affect the flow of the oil through the filter. So now I need to adjust it. So by clicking Adjust Stock Quantity, I can say I need to subtract 1 out of inventory, quantity of 1, and I'm going to put my initials in because I'm the one who adjusted it. And what this will do by clicking OK is it now reduced my stock on hand to 5. And what else happened is it is now a cost of goods. It's an expense because it's an inventory adjustment. We still had to pay for that part. The fact that we didn't sell it because it was damaged still means that it's an expense to our company. So that automatically was tracked on our financials under the inventory adjustment, which is the 56,000 account on your general ledger. Now price, this just brings us back to our price screen. If we want to adjust our selling price, let's say we want to adjust, you know what, I'm really not going to let this default to the profit margin. I'm going to mark it to 45% like I did the other part. So I would just unclick the default price matrix and say, yeah, I'm going to price this at 45% profit margin. User charges, again, I might charge $1 for every time I sell this filter because I have to pay to dispose of this filter in most states. So I'm going to automatically have a hazardous materials fees added to the RO whenever I select this filter for a job. Vendors, here I can assign another vendor. Let's say my primary vendor is factory, but my second vendor would be Napa. And it allows me to put in their special part number and their cost if it's a little bit different. Let's say it's a little bit more. So here I have priority 1 and 2, and I know how much I typically buy this part from for these vendors. And also if your vendor changes prices on you, you kind of can go back and reference, hey guys, you were paying me $338 for the past 8 months. Why are you changing prices on me? Cores, I can go in here and track cores. It would tell me the last one that I cost, how much I paid for it last time, what the cost was, how much I charged my customer, and if I have any in stock. And likewise, I can adjust these out of stock as well. So let's go ahead and uncheck this. This is an oil filter. Now, cross-reference. This is one I really want to cover. There's a little bit of confusion out there on how this cross-reference feature works. Now, if I were to click on Add Cross-Reference, I want to add a cross-reference here. I could just enter in a part number. I don't know what it is. Let's say 1234. And we'll just call it oil filter, what's it, Motorcraft, I believe. And here, this is just a cross-reference to be able to look it up. An interchangeable part, if we wanted to, instead of putting in a part number, let's just go ahead and say, okay, add it. Let's enter another one. Let's say we want to select an interchangeable part from the list. A different part number. Now, an interchangeable part has its own part record. It's something that we purchase, we stock, we enter into the system using its own part number. But for example, you know, if you buy something like a valve cover gasket for a Mercury Sable, you know, it works on a Ford Taurus. They're pretty much the same platform. So they're interchangeable parts, but if you were to order them from the dealer, they're going to be completely different part numbers. So that's the difference between cross-reference and interchangeable parts. Any questions on that? Okay. So it's same as superseded part. We may end up putting in a different part number and it's superseded. We just tell it it is. Another way, let me go ahead and cancel this. Another way we can supersede a part, this is a great one. This one happens all the time. Yes, I want to save my changes. Let's say I have a GM part, and it's, let's see, 251, let's see, 2517. Okay, here's an oil filter, for example. Now, if GM supersedes that part number like they did on this oil filter, for example, you may be looking on here, how do I do that? How do I do that supersede? It's really simple. You know, all you do is you start typing the new number right in the part number field, and then when you click OK, it'll ask you. MaxTrax has determined that you've changed that part number. What do you want to do with that when you save this part record? And you can cancel this, go back to the part record, or just say, yes, the part was superseded. So add a cross-reference for me. So if I look it up by the old part number, because I might have memorized that, it'll automatically be a cross-reference for me. But going forward, this part record is now this new part number, 192-10286. So that's what's going to show up on my customer repair orders. And going forward, that should be the part number also that I enter on my restock parts tickets. And I could say that, no, the old part number was not superseded. I just want to fix the part number. It was wrong, or I want to change the format. And also we can say, do you want to update existing kits with that new part number? So if I had any kits out there with my old GM number, it would just automatically put in the new part number, so it would be easier for ordering. And, of course, put the correct part number on future ROs when I select that kit. So I'm going to go ahead and save my changes. So this is my new part number. Any questions on that? Any questions so far? So two other things I want to track is a physical inventory. So if you're going to go back and do a quarterly or end of the year, hopefully everybody's doing an inventory here at the end of the year, so your inventory adjustments are expenses on your taxes at the end of the year. The way that we do that is under the Parts Manager, we have an option to take physical inventory. Now, the physical inventory is essentially a worksheet or a set of worksheets that you can print out, actually take out to the parts department, parts room, check off how many quantities you have of each item listed on the worksheet, and then you come back in and enter these in. Now, these can be pretty numerous. Of course, this is just a brand new, fresh copy of MaxTrax that I just put on for the webinar, so it's just going to have a few part numbers. But I have shops that have 60, 70,000 part numbers. And if you use imported catalogs, you could have 400,000 parts in your parts database. So what you would want to do before you do this physical inventory worksheet is under Setups, Repair Orders and Parts Invoices, we have a physical inventory link. And this will tell us only include parts or don't include parts that do or don't have the zero stock on hand. So really, right now this is set up just to show everything we have in inventory. But if we want part numbers in case something isn't included, we could also include parts that show zero stock on hand. And also, do we want to set it up for stocking or non-stocking parts? Let's say we want to include non-stocking. This is why I would check this checkbox. So now if I were to go back to Parts Manager and take that physical inventory and create a worksheet, it'll say, once you create the physical inventory pages, you must count and post the physical inventory before any other inventory activity is done. Now, the reason why they're saying that is if you're trying to count your stuff and you're entering your restock parts tickets, or if you're posting off some ROs, your numbers are going to be off a little bit. So it's just telling you, try to do this while you're not doing a lot of other activity in the system. And let's say we want to go ahead and continue. So I can decide how I want to order the parts on the list. Let's say I'm just going to go by part number, or I could group it by part or product code. But let's say create the physical inventory worksheet. So of course I don't have very much in here, so I just have one page. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Oh, let's see. Okay, I just printed that, but I want to actually look at it. So let's enter our quantities here. By clicking on Enter Quantities, this is what it looks like. So what we have here is we have all of our parts listed, whether or not it has a zero quantity or not. And here it tells us even where it's located, so we know where to go find it. And then we manually enter in the new quantity. Let's say this is actually 205. How would we know exactly? I don't know. Let's say we had two. We actually found two of these. They weren't in the system. The rest of this looks good. If I were only to enter in a new quantity for these two and click OK, of course it needs me to say who's it counted by. Here's my initials. I complete my page, And if I click complete my page and click OK, the only parts records that are adjusted in the system are the ones with the new quantity. Okay? It says the page is marked as complete, but not all items have a new quantity. Are you sure you want to continue? And you say yes. I'm just worried about counting these few items. And it says new quantities of 0 will be used. And this only applies to, it says right here, the items that you do not enter a quantity will not be used with the physical or inventory is posted. So we don't have to worry about that. This only applies to where the new quantity is blank. Anything with 0, of course, here would be changed. So now we close, and we're done with this one. So now that would automatically have gone in and adjusted my inventory. So the last thing I want to cover real quick, and then we'll just open it up for questions if we have any, is under reports. We have a ton of inventory reports. And with our next release, we're going to have many, many, many more reports. Not just an inventory, of course, but lots of different customer reports, service counter reports. So here I can track my best sellers. I can see what my core valuation is, what my core sales are. I also could have an excess inventory report, so I know really what's not moving. Do I need to get some stuff back to my parts vendor? This is a general inventory list of all my parts, and you can see the description shows here down below for each one that I'm selecting. I can get a summary. I can also look at any inventory adjustments. I can see what adjustments have been made up or down in my system. I can view my inventory pricing, sales history, and this is nice to be able to get either a summary or detailed history of what's selling, what isn't selling, and again, it shows it by month. I can get a total inventory evaluation. Let's run that one for fun. If I click Run Report, and let's say I'm just going to run for everything. It's going to tell me that, well, first of all, I'm negative on 2 parts, so I need to get those in stock. But it says I have a total of 450 parts, 15 part numbers, but 450 items on hand. Of course, this is including my oil. And this is how much the value is for all of those parts. And this is my cost, by the way, not the selling cost, guys. And then manufacturer list, we can just have a list of all of our manufacturers printed out. And then we can look at what parts do we have on order. This will let us know what should be coming in, and parts purchased for a particular date range, or maybe what are my parts purchased that I purchased from Factory Motor Parts? What do I buy from them? So if I were to do that, let's see if it'll work. If I put in Factory FAC, see if that'll work. So it'll tell me what I've purchased from Factory and what invoice it came on, quantity received, cost. This is also handy if I want to verify. Make sure they're not charging me a different pricing. Maybe I was J minus 10 before, and now I'm just jobber. So if you want to be able to track how much you pay for parts from a particular vendor, you can do that. And then reorder report, of course, this just tells you what you need, what you don't have in stock that you want to reorder. Remember those best quantities, minimum quantities I put in there? And we can do it by vendor or regardless of vendor. And then also parts reserve detail. This is another valuable tool. Also you can use while you're doing your inventory. If I click this Run Report, it'll tell me that I currently have these parts. They're still on the premises. They're still showing an inventory, but now these are the ones that are on reserve. I have 6 quarts reserved on this invoice number at 10,008. I have an oil filter reserved. I also have a fuel filter reserved. And then the summary just tells you that instead of the details listing each RO, just the numbers, again, for inventory. And we can print a list of all of our purchase orders. And a short sold report, pretty important. This is just telling me, look, Sabrina, these are short sold. You need to get these parts in the system because they're negatives. Remember my inventory valuation was negative by 2 parts? Here I know exactly what those 2 parts are. So it probably just means I have some restock parts tickets laying around, or I actually need to get some parts ordered. And actually it says one's on order, and it does say one is needed, so I need to go ahead and get a parts order created for that. So any questions? Did you guys find this helpful, or was this pretty much just old hat for you?
We found some things that were good for us that we didn't know about, but most of it we knew already.
Wonderful. So any questions on any of those features? Okay. Well, I'll cut this one short. We usually ask questions, have question and answer for a couple minutes, but if everybody's pretty comfortable with what we reviewed, I'll look forward to seeing you guys on our next webinar. We do have scheduled for next Wednesday, same time, parts price matrix and how to automate parts pricing. This is going to be going over a little bit about the parts price matrix feature, but also the different pricing methods that people use other than their handheld calculator. How do we mimic, how do we duplicate or replicate in the system how we've been doing it by hand all these years? How do I get that into the system? So that's going to be next Wednesday. The following Wednesday is going to be menu labors, how to create fixed price services where you can you can select a labor that has parts tied to it automatically. And then at the end of the month, on Wednesday the 24th, we're going to be going over kits. So if you guys have any interest in any of those webinars, just go onto the website, go under the training tab, and that's where we're going to have recorded webinars and the schedule for the future live webinars. So thank you everyone for coming, and everyone have a great rest of the week. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Sabrina.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, bye-bye.